The world is a place full of unsolved mysteries. Humans have achieved a lot in science and have grown over the years, but we remain clueless about many things around us. The strangest and most beautiful thing about the earth is the oceans. The endless oceans. Our oceans are home to many myths and legends. Starting from hidden treasures, mystic ships, and even lost cities. On top of the list is the lost city of Atlantis. Is it hard to believe that an advanced civilization existed on Earth over 10,000 years ago but somehow vanished? Is it possible that such a civilization could be forgotten? Have you ever wondered where Atlantis really was? What must have happened? If the story of Atlantis is true, then it must be a geographical location, right? One of the oldest and greatest mysteries of the world is the lost city of Atlantis. Atlantis has been a topic of debate for centuries. It was first mentioned by the ancient Greek philosopher Plato endless years ago. Plato noted, the names of these first inhabitants have been preserved, but their deeds have perished on account of the catastrophes that befell those who succeeded them and the long passage of time intervening. Those of their race who survived these successive destructions were, as I said before, left as illiterate mountain people who had only heard the tradition of the name of the rulers of their country and beyond these only little of their deeds. Now, they were pleased to give their descendants the name of those rulers, even though they were unaware of their ancestors' virtues and institutions except of some dim legends concerning each of them. Then, for many generations, these survivors and their children lived in distress for their survival and gave thought to their needs. They spoke only for supplying these needs and had no interest in the distant past events. Based on what Plato said, we can indeed say that the people forgot their past, and the only way this history lived was through myth and legend. But the world has some questions. Where could this city be? Some had suggested that the Antarctic is where the Atlantic is resting. Then, there is also speculation that this city rests at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean between Europe and the Americas. But then, some say that the Bermuda Triangle, the Caribbean, was this city's original location. But no consensus has ever been reached on where Atlantis once existed. So, where could it be? For centuries, the debates among scholars and historians about where this city could be were endless. That's why the story takes place in the Richat structure, also known as the Eye of Sahara. Once again, it is a site that could very well be the location of the lost city of Atlantis. The Eye of Sahara was relatively unknown to the world until the 1980s. The Eye of Sahara, the Richat structure, is a remote geological formation located in Mauritania, Africa, in the middle of the desert. The Eye of Sahara has breathtaking beauty from its unique physical features. It is an amazing geological wonder. The formation contains rocks that are at least 100 million years old. Some of the rocks date back before the appearance of life on Earth. Crazy, right? Based on Plato's description of the lost city of Atlantis, the Eye of Sahara, it is believed to be the best candidate for the original location. But to understand more about this amazing discovery, we must go through some important topics. We must know who Plato was. We must decipher what Atlantis is and what the Richat structure is. We must compare the description of Plato with the Richat structure. We can begin to connect the dots. But before we start, what is Atlantis? Over 10,000 years ago, Atlantis was the seat of power that the Atlantean people once held. It is said that the Atlantean people lived on a mighty island with very distinct geological features. Was this legendary city sunk by the gods for their impunity, losing all of its secrets to the endless sea? Atlantis is believed to have had an extremely powerful military civilization, a vast navy, and a strong merchant class. Who ruled Atlantis, and what were they like? It is believed that the rulers of Atlantis were loving and kind. The rulers of Atlantis were good to their people. Some say that the Atlantean civilization was even more advanced than we are today. It is said that they knew the secrets of anti-gravity and had contact with extraterrestrial civilizations. Some said that even the city of Atlantis itself was an extraterrestrial colony on Earth. But there was no point in breaking down these arguments. Many believe that all of this was just a story, a myth that Plato created inside his head. Even if it wasn't fiction of his imagination, it was a mash of ideas and representations of contemporary and historical civilizations during his time. It makes us wonder. Is there any evidence contributing to the theory that this city existed? Was Atlantis a real powerful nation? Was it swept in the depth of the sea, erasing its legacy from the human psyche? To help us understand more, we have Plato. Plato was an ancient Greek philosopher that lived almost 500 years ago. One of the greatest philosophers to have ever lived on Earth. Plato was a student of Socrates, the teacher of Aristotle. Plato was admired in his time and was an influential figure in literature and history. Plato has also written a lot of books. Two of Plato's books are the dialogues The Critias and Timaeus. This is where the modern understanding of Atlantis was formed. Throughout this dialogue, Plato described the empire and city of Atlantis, the people that lived there, and their society. Plato even gave a detailed description of the geography of Atlantis. starting from its structure, its history, and then the terrible destruction. The notes and the writings of Plato were passed down for 6 generations. They were passed down for generations from his relatives, Solon. Who was Solon? Solon was an Athenian statesman and lawmaker. He was known for his work on injustice and corruption reform. Everyone knew Solon because of his strong personality and morals. Solon had received the information about the people who had lived in Atlantis. He visited a temple on his journey to Egypt and had the Egyptian priest science translate the story from the hieroglyphs. Then, Solon took the translations and went back to Athens. The notes and the translations were kept in his family. Then, after some time of studying them, Plato published them. They were the dialogues of Cretias and Timaeus. Plato learned a lot about Atlantis from Solon's translated notes. He learned that Atlantis was a seafaring society with a capital city built in the form of concentric rings of water and land. It was 2 of land and 3 of water. Atlantis was a huge city, over 20 kilometers in width, and had mountains to the north. In the center of the island, the city had fresh water. Atlantis was ruled by a king named Atlas. Plato learned a lot about this city. He learned that this city was swallowed in the sea in a day. The city's destruction happened 9000 years before Solon's visit, which was 2600 years ago. Were animals in the city of Atlantis? Had Plato written anything about that? Yes. There was. Throughout the dialogues, we learn that there were animals on the island. Plato and Solon were known as a man of honor and honesty. Can we believe that or all of this story is just from their own imagination? What if the accounts of Solon as translated to him by the Egyptian priests didn't happen at all? Or is it possible that our perceptions of the past are faulty? Is history as we know it? Because if it is said that the destruction of the city happened 12,000 years, then it is believed that all of the notes and evidence would be in the depth of the sea, together with the city. It wouldn't be able to be found. People believe that we would find clues and evidence if the city ever existed. If the humans didn't find any clue, this should be just a myth, a legend. Myths were simply stories made up to explain things that people didn't understand. Do myths ever turn out to be true? However, there are examples of history that have been labeled as myths. Like everyone, you might hear about Homer's epic poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey. They tell the story of the Trojan War. It's where Greeks used the famous Trojan horse. It was used to defeat the Trojans. But this story was believed to be a myth. It is believed that no such war has ever taken place. The city was rumored to be true but didn't exist. But, in the year 1822, a businessman in Turkey was able to locate the city, Troja, and began archaeological digs. When the people located the place, they went there and began to look for clues. The layout of the city and the physical damage on the walls that were found in that location made the human think that the story was true. The famous Trojan War might have happened. The most exciting part of this story is that the poems of Homer were passed down orally for centuries before ever being recorded. It was labeled as fabrication until proof of its existence came to light. Another famous myth is the tale of Aurora. The Solomon Islanders told this tale. The story goes this way. A man who, after his wife, decides to elope with another man on an island named Tianamanu. The man decides to place a curse on the island. He brings the curse to the island in a canoe adorned with 4 wave murals. The man planted 2 taro plants on the island. But, he kept one for himself and grew it on another island. Then, the man's plant began to sprout out and caused disasters on the island. The man was watching over a mountain and noticed that as the plant was growing, it would cause the waves to come at the island and make it sink. It was believed that this story was just a myth, but later on, what happened was said to be true. It was found out that the island of Tianamanu was sunk into the ocean, not from a series of waves sent from anger and curse, but from an undersea tremor. Underwater is the remains of what once was an island. Did this man make the island sink in from his jealousy? Did his curse make it sink? That's simply a no. But there was an island that was sunk below the ocean surface. Maybe the story got told by generations and has changed in detail. Had the same happened with the city of Atlantis? Orichalcum is a mythical material that was rumored to exist in the past. This material had many unique qualities that made it extremely valuable and sought after. It was malleable, non-oxidizing, and durable. It was believed that this material had a little bit of the color gold. It was such a beautiful material. Even Aphrodite had earrings that were made out of this material. But, according to the historical record, a material like this had never existed before. Then, on a random day, in 2015, something changed. A shipwreck was discovered in the Mediterranean, carrying ingots and jewelry made of mysterious materials. The material had all of the qualities of orichalcum. It turned out that material existed. It turned out to be a high-quality brass malleable, non-oxidizing, and durable. So, this was just another myth that turned out to be true. Many things have happened that humans have no solid explanation for. For centuries humans forgot how to make concrete, develop indoor plumbing, central heating calculus, astronomical calculations, etc. All have been lost to time, only to be rediscovered years later. For example, the Roman Empire. Roman Empire used a concrete formula that made their concrete far more potent than any of our modern-day concrete. Unfortunately, the Roman formula was lost, never to be found again. No one can replicate it no more. Legends of materials such as flexible glass and others are thought to be myths. People had forgotten a lot through the years. But imagine if humans could forget about so much of its history in only the last 2,500 years, what else could they forget? So, the question is it possible that there are stories with no archaeological evidence to corroborate them yet that are connected to the actual events of the past? However, it is important to go over unrelated events in history, because they might just lay the groundwork for the case of the lost city of Atlantis. So, here is a recap of what we have and know so far. Myths that were thought to be nothing more than fables can be based on historical events. Actual events can be passed down orally for centuries and still be a reasonably accurate representation of events. Large-scale natural disasters can wipe out traces of human existence easily. Humans are good at developing sophisticated tools and science only to forget about them, leaving them to be rediscovered in the future. Incredible men Solon and Plato, known for their character, shared the details of the city of Atlantis. If you use all of these points, it might seem like there is a possibility that the city of Atlantis was actual. But, the most important questions are, did the details about the city of Atlantis match with the recut structure of the Eye of Sahara? Is there corroborating evidence that places Atlantis near the same area? These questions lead us close to knowing if the city ever existed and, if yes, where it is located now. But first of all, let's talk more about this recut structure. The recut structure is a geological formation in the desert of Mauritania in Africa. The locals already knew it, but it was officially discovered in the 1980s by astronauts on the Gemini 4 mission. The astronauts saw the formation as they buzzed overhead. The structure is called the Eye of the Sahara. It is named this way because of its unique geological shape. It is a massive circular shape made of concentric rings of hills and valleys in almost a perfect circle. If you take a look from a distance, it looks just like an eye. It is located nearly 400 kilometers or 250 miles from the coast of West Africa and the ocean. The Eye of Sahara's structure is so unusual that it has never been seen anywhere. Some believe that they are the remnants of a volcanic-induced crater. Not from an eruption, but a scar left from subterranean pressure wreaking havoc on the earth. The experts believe that this process had repeated many times, causing the concentric rings of circles. This shape makes the Eye of Sahara the possible candidate for the original location of Atlantis. The best way to know is to compare the geography and the details of the area corresponding to the details translated by Plato and Solon. What did Plato say about the geography of the city of Atlantis? Plato said, there were alternate zones of sea and land, larger and smaller encircling one another. There were 2 of land and 3 of water which were turned as if with a lathe, each having its circumference equidistant every way from the center. There is a strong correlation if you compare what Plato said with the physical characteristics of the recut structure. It is also the only natural formation that would probably match the description. The recut structure is big, and you might mistake it for rocky hills and valleys. You can't notice how big it is from the ground. How big is the Eye of Sahara? If you measured the outside rings of the concentric circles, you would get a measurement of 23.5 kilometers or 15 miles across a vast structure. When Solon translated the note, he described the size of the city this way: the circular island of Atlantis had a diameter of 127 stadia. Stadia. A word that not many can be familiar with. What is stadia? A stadia is a standard unit of measurement in the time of Plato. 1 stadia is equivalent to 607 feet. 127 stadia is equal to 77,089 feet. If you convert it to kilometers, you get 23.4 kilometers or 15 miles. That's crazy. This means that the measures perfectly match each other. The recut structure is not very accessible. It is ringed in the north by mountains and is open to the desert facing the south. Being in the desert means a featureless landscape surrounding the recut structure. However, a particularly flat rectangle plain is very close to the structure itself. Did the description of Plato say anything about the topography of Atlantis? Yes. Plato said, the country immediately surrounding the city of Atlantis was a level plain, itself surrounded by mountains which descended towards the sea. The mountains of the island of Atlantis were celebrated for number, size, and beauty. This part of the island looks south and was sheltered from the north. The city of Atlantis was known to have access to the sea from the south. We can see through the recut structure that there is something that looks like ancient water access. The most exciting thing is that the water at the Eye of the Sahara is saltwater. It's interesting knowing that this area sits at over 1,000 feet above sea level. Another interesting fact is that skeletons of whales have been found in this area. Those are enough evidence to know that this area was once part of the sea. The only part of the Richat structure that has freshwater is the center. But, in the other places in the area, you need to dig 400 feet to get access to freshwater. The city of Atlantis is said to have freshwater that had come from the center of the city at the behest of the god Poseidon. From what Plato had noted, we can clearly understand, a well near the central Acropolis provided the city with fresh water. The god Poseidon found no difficulty in making special arrangements for the center island, bringing up 2 springs of water from beneath the earth, warm water and cold. The descriptions of Plato had started to match with the physical realities of the Richat structure. It is becoming more believable that this is the area where the city of Atlantis is. How is it possible that the notes written 500 years ago perfectly match natural formation in the middle of the modern world? All of this can't be a coincidence. Many skeletons and bones of animals had been found near the Richat structure. The remains of elephants have been found near the area. There were also artworks written on the walls, drawings of elephants in the cave near the Richat structure. But this is not a big surprise since Sahara used to be lush, fertile land for as little as 5000 years ago. This means that it is a definite possibility to have an abundance of animal and plant life in the area, including elephants and other large mammals. What is so unique about the connection between this animal, the elephant? Well, Plato had mentioned the elephant saying that there were significant numbers of elephants on the island. This is one of the many things that distinguishes the Richat structure from many other theorized locations for Atlantis. The Richat structure makes logical and historical sense that there would be elephants on the island due to their proximity to them. The Richat structure is just like any other desert. It has stones, and it's full of sand. But, there is a disproportionately large number of white, red, and black rocks. Another notable characteristic of the local geography is that Mauritania is a large producer of gold and other metals. It is interesting, because Plato wrote about the gold and the metal of the city of Atlantis. He had noted there was an abundance of metals, copper, and gold. The stone they quarried was white, another black, and a third red. Plato said that the city of Atlantis was constructed with white, red, and black stones. The descriptions of Plato match the Richat structure so precisely. But, is there any other evidence that might tell us that we are talking about the same area, but just many years ago? What happened to this city? Why did it fade from the face of the earth? What had Plato said about this? Plato had said that the city of Atlantis got destroyed because the gods got angry at the people who lived there. Plato said that the people had become greedy, petty, and morally bankrupt. Plato said that the gods had had enough and couldn't continue that way. Then, the gods sent earthquakes and volcanoes that caused the island to sink into the sea. Plato said, in a single day and night of misfortune, the islands of Atlantis disappeared into the depths of the sea. Atlantis is part of the Atlantic that is no longer accessible by ship. This was one of the most important and most exciting things that Plato had noted. The entire city of Atlantis was wiped into the ocean's depth in just one night. As we know now, based on the island of Tiaminamu, islands can indeed be sunk in just one night by natural causes. However, is there evidence of a disaster of this magnitude in the historical record? What do you think? Getting to know on what date the city of Atlantis was sunk is essential. We all know that Solon had lived 2600 years ago, and when he was told of Atlantis, the records of the Egyptians claimed it happened 9000 years before. The city's destruction might have occurred approximately 11,600 years ago. What do you think? What did the planet look like? How were the world and the people 11,600 years ago? Some say that this time was when the hunter-gatherers were slowly starting to settle and begin farming the land. Did anything else happen around this time? The Younger Dryas, the turbulent period at the end of the last ice age, ended 11,600 years ago. This process was unusual in so many ways. The hotties of the sun were rapid up to 10 degrees Celsius in a matter of mere decades. Also, the sea levels rose drastically in a short time. There was also a mass extinction in North America, where 35 species of large mammals died off along with the Clovis culture of Native Americans. But, the question is, what caused these unusual and turbulent events? It is believed that there was an enormous asteroid impact in the northern hemisphere, causing massive ice water melting. It is said to happen scale fires and a shock wave that could be felt worldwide. Luckily, there is evidence to suggest that a giant asteroid or meteor impacted the Earth near Greenland around that time. This process would send a tidal wave hurtling across the Atlantic as ice sheets would evaporate and spew superheated steam into the atmosphere. Then, the water would flow into the ocean, drastically disrupting the ocean currents by introducing unfathomable amounts of freshwater to their current flows. The climate would be affected, and this change would last for decades. The sciences suggested that meltwater changed the ocean cycles. This led to a period of global warming. Is it possible that an asteroid impact from so far away caused the end of the city of Atlantis? Could one night of earthquake and fire put a whole city under the depths of the sea? Is there evidence of this conclusion? The amount of water that an asteroid impact is hard to fathom. We can look at the Richat structure from a distant view and see if it seems like an area that could be washed away from a giant wave. If the landscape surrounding the Richat structure tells a story, it is that of a sudden flood that flew over the land. But the Richat structure might have gone through another volcanic shift. It is possible to cause the entire island to fall into the ocean. Was this phenomenon what it was described as the gods getting angry? You might ask why we are talking about the Younger Dryas. But the Younger Dryas impacts the theory and the date of the destruction of Atlantis. If the Younger Dryas impact was strong enough to alter the Earth's climate drastically, why not be the possibility of putting a whole city underneath the sea? Something else is important to note, the Göbekli Tepe. Göbekli Tepe is the oldest temple ever to exist. This temple was built over 12,000 years ago in Turkey. The construction of this temple is unique and the people thought that the hands of humans did not create this. But if people were so wrong about the date of these constructions, what else could they be wrong about? The Göbekli Tepe was buried on purpose. Why would someone bury a temple? Could it be that the locals who had built this temple saw all the things happening to the world around that time and wanted this temple to be safe? Could it be that this was why they had buried it? The locals might have wanted to return to this place once they knew it was safe. However, the story of the city of Atlantis is even dated even before Cretius and Timaeus. Herodotus, known as the father of history, had lived between 484 and 425. He has gathered historical and geographical knowledge of all civilizations known to the Greeks. Then, this was used for the construction of a detailed map showing parts of Europe, Africa, and Asia. On that map, we could see where the Atlantis was, which in the modern day it went by the name Mauritania. This map was used to say that it was the most accurate map. He was known and was respected and honored by everyone. Could a man like him lie about an imaginary city? The place now known as Mauritania has a long and storied history, one of which is particularly relevant to the history of Atlantis. The first king of Atlantis was said to be a king named Atlas. Atlas was said to be the son of Poseidon. Now, the question was, who was the first king of Mauritania? The first king of Mauritania was Atlas. Was this a coincidence? It is just another piece of evidence that Atlantis existed in a place that now is called Mauritania. As Plato had said before, the names of these first inhabitants have been preserved, but their deeds have perished on account of the catastrophes that befell those who succeeded them and the long passage of time intervening. Those of their race who survived these successive destructions were, as I said before, left as illiterate mountain people who had only heard the tradition of the name of the rulers of their country and beyond these only little of their deeds. Now, they were pleased to give their descendants the name of those rulers, even though they were unaware of their ancestors' virtues and institutions except of some dim legends concerning each of them. Then, for many generations, these survivors and their children lived in distress for their survival and gave thought to their needs. They spoke only for supplying these needs and had no interest in the distant past events. The evidence that the Richat structure is the original place where the city of Atlantis had sunk is solid. Starting from the size of the area, the topography, the time frame of its destruction, its shape, and much more make it even more believable. As Plato said, this tale about Atlantis, though strange, is certainly true, having been attested to by Solon, who was the wisest of the 7 sages. Now we can look at the story of Atlantis not just as a myth but as a window of our past.